and welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in on occasional Saturdays as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa. I use any pronouns, and our guest this week is Emi Ferguson.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. So I know that I was super excited when I was getting you on the podcast because I went and I was like, oh my goodness, another flutist, composer, vocalist, which is such an exciting combination for me as a flutist, composer, vocalist. And I think that being a very multifaceted person lends itself to being an artist really well. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what the path has been like to find these different passions and balance them throughout your career.
Oh goodness. I mean, I think it's really tricky for all of us.
Yeah.
We're living in a time that, in the I would say the 20th century, early 21st century,
Mm-hmm.
it's a time of narrowing down, of
Mm-hmm.
focus, where people, really dig into one thing and one thing only. And so for me, when I was in school, it was quite unusual for somebody to be interested in doing multiple things.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really excited to see that that's changing in a lot of educational systems here in the United States, which is really fantastic. But it never felt right to me to just be
Mm.
one thing, because I was so excited and curious about so many things. And when you get to play an instrument like the flute, which I know we're both very biased,
Yeah.
but I like to think that, the flute is the oldest melodic instrument in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has like this incredible place, I think, within our cultural DNA. Like it hits us in our bones in ways we can't even describe, because it's been part of human development for so many thousands of years.
Yeah.
And part of that is that it's an expression of the voice. It's to mimic the
Mm.
voice, and it's to be able to make music, outside of your body, but also still within, in your body. So the three things,
Yeah.
playing the flute, singing, writing music, really feel much more intertwined than they ever felt separate.
Mm. Yeah. I know that I really feel the same way. And even now, I'm still in the sort of conservatory system. I still have people that think that it's unusual to be more than one thing. And even the school that I am at has like a master's of music as a performer composer, 1 degree, and yet I'm here just as a composer, and there's no performance opportunities for us to do. So I think that the dichotomy is so strong, but I also feel like they just sort of they feed off of one another. I'm a musician, and that's what I am, and I do all of these things, but that yeah. So I totally relate to that.
I think it's so hard when you're in school as well. There's so much to learn. I mean, that's the amazing thing about music, is that you don't learn it all in 4 years.
Right,
It's a
right.
lifelong pursuit. And so I can only imagine how challenging it is to figure out what goes in a curriculum,
Yeah.
for educators, and but for me it's a lifelong pursuit of learning more, hearing more, and just being open to the fact that music is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
and there's always going to be something new to listen to and new to learn.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I know you on your website it mentioned that you seriously considered going into epidemiology,
Yeah.
which I really relate to. I wanted to be like biologist and do biomedical sciences, and then at very much the last minute for me, I sort of pivoted and was like, actually, I'm going to go get a music degree. So
Wow.
yeah. So at what point was that sort of shift happen, or when did it become obvious that music was going to be this sort of central focus of what you do, of your being, I guess?
Well, I wish I kind of knew exactly when, and
Sure.
I think music has become the thing that allows me access to so many other ways of thinking now, and
Mm,
that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's for me, it was really dangerous to say, like, I'm going to be a musician and this is the only thing you can do. And this is the way that you do it, a very narrow
Hmm.
path, kind of back to what we were just speaking
Right.
about. I think that was really scary to me. And that was essentially the path that I entered into as a freshman at Juilliard,
Hmm.
was that, you're going to go in this direction. And it was really hard for me because I came from a high school that was very academic, but had no music program whatsoever.
Oh,
So when
wow.
I got to Juilliard, I didn't really know how to square those two things. And so I was very, very fortunate that I was able to cross register at Columbia's public health school,
Cool.
Mailman Public School of Health, working on studies of epidemiology, which was incredible, and gave me sort of that different outlet that I was looking for at the time. Um, I ended up working at Mount Sinai Hospital in the summers instead of going to festivals. And I remember
Cool.
at the end of my junior year, I really missed playing scales. And I thought, oh gosh, if I miss playing scales, then I must really miss playing the flute. And I had thought I was going to finish my degree at Juilliard and then try to go to medical school, but I instead decided to stay in music, and here I am today. But it was at that point really that I was able to see that music is just that first step, and that there's so many lines of inquiry that
Hmm.
you can go down, because
Yeah.
it is something that connects every single person on this planet. And that's so cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. That's such a cool story. I yeah, kind of balancing the two during undergraduate studies must have been really intense.
Yeah, I mean, it was very intense, but it was really nice to have the balance, actually, and have my
Hmm.
brain sort of be thinking about two different things.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to a point where, I mean, I was an undergraduate conservatory student who, weaseled her way into classes at like a graduate, in a graduate medical program. I didn't belong there, but the teachers were incredible, and they said, well, if you're interested, we're not going to cut you any slack. You can come, but you have to, like, you're just one of the students, and you
Hmm.
just have to work. And that was incredible. But it got to a point where the classes really, really demanded a lot more time of me than I was able to give with my commitments as a
Hmm.
musician. And so I had to sort of at that point say, all right, it's going to have to be one or the other. Or,
Yeah.
if I'm going to do that, I have to go and really focus on it for a little bit. And
Hmm.
uh, music ended up being the path I went down, but it's been
Yeah.
really fun to find opportunities to combine those two things. And this past year, I created a sort of a short podcast series with WQXR, which is a radio
Hmm.
station here in New York, about the intersection of, or the impact of, syphilis on classical composers. So looking at it from an epidemiological standpoint and from a musical standpoint, and see how all of that really did impact these people's lives and the music they were making, as
Yeah.
well as, a PSA, because we are experiencing a syphilis surge today.
Yeah. That's
So
incredible. And
it's fun.
yeah, no, I really love projects like that where, especially like I feel cool to be a part of, where it's like I am one of the very few people in the world who is qualified to speak on both of these things at a very high level.
Well,
And I love it. I think it's so fun when you find that niche. I did like high
yeah.
school robotics all through high school, and I was like, yes, I'm going to do biomedical engineering. I'm going to go into the medical field and I'm going to work in this technology, and then didn't do that. And now in my second graduate degree, I've like rolled back around and now I'm in the electronic music scene and doing all of these like coding things. And I get to go back to my like C++ training that I did in high school with a totally different idea in mind. And like that kind of like wrapping everything together in a
Yeah.
nice little bow, and music bringing you back around it. I really relate to it. And I
Right.
think it's so powerful.
So powerful. And and it's just, I had a great time.
Yeah, yeah, that's really really beautiful. And that I definitely am gonna have to check out that syphilis series. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's part of, you can find it as part of WQXR's Artist Propulsion Lab.
Cool.
So it's 4 parts on there, and there's amazing other projects that a couple other artists here in New York also worked on that span very different topics other than syphilis. So there's something for everyone there, and I promise it's all safe for work. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, so cool. So I know sort of the main motivation behind you coming on this podcast is your upcoming book, which is so exciting. I've read it and I think that it is just wonderful. So I'm curious if you want to introduce us to your book and then also talk about kind of what the process was like from getting the spark of an idea all the way up through now we're looking like staring down a publishing date.
I know, crazy. Well, the book is called Iconic Composers, and it is not about syphilis. So, this
Got it.
this is
Non-syphilis
not
book.
about, but it's a book looking at 50 incredible composers in the Western classical canon from the past 1,000 years. People who lived in extraordinary lives and wrote amazing music. And it comes out in June, which is very
Yes.
soon, and it
Oh
comes
my
out in a
goodness.
month, which I can't believe.
Yeah.
But it's been such a joy and such a privilege to work on, and something that I really never thought I would end up working on. But I was so excited when the illustrator David Sisko, who does beautiful illustrations for
Yeah.
this book, called my colleague Nick Sisko, his cousin, and
Hmm.
said, "Hey, I want to write a book on composers. Would you guys want to write the biographies for each one of
Yeah.
these composers?" And we were so excited. Nick and I have known each other a very long time and met at Juilliard. Nick was
Hmm.
there as a composer. I was there as a
Hmm.
flute player, but at that time I
Yeah.
was dabbling in composition as well. And it was the biggest challenge to choose
Yeah.
only 50 composers.
Yeah.
As you know,
Yeah.
it's really, it was heartbreaking, and we had so many arguments about, well, this person, that person, what about this? And like
Hmm.
every time, every single person we couldn't include in the book was this like, oh, gut-wrenching
Yeah.
experience, because there are so many incredible composers out there, some that many listeners will know, and others that will be new to you.
Hmm.
And my first and most important thing to say to anybody listening is just go out there and listen to as much music as possible, and keep looking for music by people you haven't heard before,
Yeah.
because it's incredible. But this book kind of balances introducing people to some composers that they will know, people like Johann Sebastian Bach, people like Giuseppe Verdi or George Gershwin, Scott Joplin, along with people that you might not be quite as familiar with, which is
Hmm.
really exciting, because all of these people I adore and I want people to know about them. I wish that I had known about them when I was younger. And so hopefully this book is kind of a jumping off point for any reader to be inspired by the stories that they read in there, and go and listen to these folks' music and learn more about them, because sadly we had to boil down their entire lives to 250 words. So we are just scratching the surface of
Hmm.
how incredible these people were, and iconic. It just doesn't do them justice. They're just out of this world amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing project. And I know, I mean, like you said, the choosing of just 50 composers is an impossible task. But I remember thinking when I was reading it that I loved the choices that you had made because there were some composers whose works I was very familiar with, in my survey of music history classes. They were like my listening quizzes.
Yeah.
But there were also some that I knew really in name only or just had heard of maybe one or two of their pieces. There were a couple I had not heard of at all. And then there were some that I like know as people like I'm friends with a couple of them. I was like, oh my
Right.
gosh. It was such an amazing mix. And I think it also like the selections that you made, I think did a really good job of portraying diversity and also the need for diversity. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how those selections kind of reflected both this need and maybe like the your why behind the book.
Well, I think the
Yeah.
most important why is to make sure that every single person feels like they can be a composer.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter
Yeah.
who you are. You can be a composer. It doesn't matter if you've had musical training. You can be a composer. It's an incredibly liberating thing to know
Hmm.
that each one of us has that capability, and we should be encouraged to go and make music.
Yeah.
In today's age, we are so fortunate that we have so much music, in our earbuds, essentially
Hmm.
at the touch of our finger,
Yeah.
that we've in some ways lost that, the importance of making live music
Mm.
together. When you look back in time and you read about so many of these musicians, you read about music making and how, if you wanted music, you had to make it yourself.
Yeah.
And if you wanted it at home, you had to play it with your siblings or with your friends. If you
Hmm.
wanted it at the bar, you had to play it with your friends. I mean, and so much of that music we don't have proper record of.
Mm.
It's important to say that so much music that we do know about today of the past is because it was written down or published. There was a record of it in some way, shape, or form, and that already is a huge privilege. So this
Hmm.
book is just scratching the surface of the many, many types of music making that have been happening in the past 1,000 years, in not only in the Western classical canon but around the world.
Hmm.
And so much of that music and so many of those people we will never know about
Yeah.
because we don't have record of it. So that's also really important for me to make sure folks understand is that this is just the beginning, and that we need everybody on board to keep digging and keep finding these incredible music makers, because that's why some of these folks are in the book. When you read
Yeah.
about someone like Florence Price,
Hmm.
this incredible composer from America from the 20th century, we talk about a story about how many of her works were found in the beginning of the 21st century in an
Right.
abandoned home in Chicago.
Yeah.
And like, that's wild to think. And it's so crazy that those weren't available when I was a student, and they're
Hmm.
available to students now, and they are becoming part of the canon
Yeah.
now for students. And that's really cool. And I want people to know that that's possible for so many people going back in history.
Yeah.
So keep finding this stuff, keep championing it, find those manuscripts, dig stuff up and interpret it with as much of yourself and your personality as you can, because that's how we bring these people and bring their music back to life.
Yeah. I love that. My undergrad orchestra got to play one of Florence Price's pieces, and I just felt hearing that story when our conductor was telling us about it, I just felt so privileged to like be able to do it, to have that, because it was an amazing piece.
Yeah.
And, by some luck, I ended up in the right time to be able to play it. And it was such a privilege to be able to do that. And I think that it's you really speak to that very well. The intense curiosity and finding out more, that just needs to continue happening. And also having it be like, I think, geared towards like older children, I think is
Yep.
so cool. It's so cool because I know that I was making music by then. I was composing by then, but I like didn't feel like it was a career opportunity for me.
Yep.
And I think that like having that a book like that would have really, really made a difference as I was, messing around in the beta version of MuseScore. Like
Yeah, we really wanted to make sure that we were focusing on the fact that each one of these people, they're people
yeah,
first and foremost. They lived, they loved, they survived, so many things
yeah,
they overcome. And we really wanted to tell stories about these people,
yeah,
because that's what unites all of us, is the fact that we're just communicating. We're trying to
Yeah.
communicate with each other and express what it means to be alive. And they did that through their music, and in so many different ways. And that's
Hmm.
what I love when we look at this group of composers, is that I think the overarching theme that really spoke to us was the fact that with incredibly hard work and perseverance, um, it those are the most important things.
Yeah.
And each one of these people, they worked so hard to get their music into the
Yeah.
world, and to have the privilege of being a musician. And that, of course, has changed so much in the 1,000 years since, Hildegard von Bingen is
Yeah.
our first person in the book, who certainly I don't think would have ever considered herself a composer, because I think she's
Right.
like, I'm not just a composer, I do
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Yeah. I know there's
The,
like still parts of especially like Berlin and the Pacific Northwest of the US that still think of Hildegard more as like a naturopathic healer. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's so cool. That's so
it's
cool.
so cool. And it's amazing that so many of these people really do have um, interests other than just music.
Yeah.
They were musicians at their core, and they also were other things. And
Yeah.
that's really important. And back to, what we were saying at the beginning, it's really, really, um, for me, it's not healthy to just be one thing. We're
Yeah.
all many things. And so this is a celebration, this book, of the many things all of these different people are, and just
Yeah.
showing that there's no one right way to be a composer. In
Yeah.
fact, any way you do it is going to be right and is fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing. I did say that it was for like older kids, but I want to tell everybody at home that I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book, and that I think that it's really very much like an all ages. And like I have, been through a couple, a handful of degrees in music now, and I still learned a lot and I still really enjoyed it. And also the illustrations are incredible.
Yeah,
The words are incredible, but the illustrations, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. It's so
it is so
fun.
fun.
It's just an incredible book. And I know we briefly mentioned like the composers who have been lost to history due to a lack of privilege. And obviously that's still something that is really prevalent
Yes.
in our intensely white, intensely male, intensely upper class, upper middle class field. And I'm wondering if you have ideas or perspectives on how to stop that same sort of um, how to stop the same kind of erasure happening in the modern day for future historians to get a good idea of the music happening today.
I think we need, I mean, we need better education. We need more value put on music making in our educational
Mm,
systems. Um, that to me is so important, because it's I like to think of it like, often you see arts organizations, we're all like fighting for the same breadcrumbs,
yeah.
and they're small, like in the
Yeah.
big stretch of like what's available. Like we're all desperate, we need these things because everybody has the same hopes and desires. We want this to be accessible and interesting and exciting for everybody. So we're
Hmm.
fighting over these breadcrumbs when actually we just need to make more bread.
Yeah.
And like, that's to me really, that's something that every single person in our community can contribute to, though. And so I think we really need to have a big shift in where we place our value. And
Hmm.
so if we're all thinking about making music and using it as a tool for diplomacy, using it as a tool for education, using it as a tool for engagement with each other, and raising everybody up and celebrating all these unique voices, like, what could go, it's amazing. It would be an
Yeah.
amazing thing. So it's a very complex issue.
Hmm.
And I know there are a lot of people who are working incredibly hard trying to think about all the different ways that we
Yeah.
can make sure that our field is inclusive to
Yeah.
everybody.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think that's really, really wonderful. And I know that like a lot of the people that I'm closest with have this sort of have these ideas that of the show it's like the true importance of music, but like the value that it really has outside of just I'm gonna listen to it because it's pretty, which like that is a huge value also. Like
Oh yeah.
I like listening to pretty things, or I love listening to things that make me excited and make me happy. Um, but then I look at the people who have a little bit of a broader expectation of what music can bring, and it is so often people who have a degree in music, and it's frustrating. It's unbelievably frustrating to have that barrier in the way. I don't know. This is just I don't have any
No,
answers,
yeah.
obviously. It's whew, yeah, it's a lot.
It's yeah, it's a lot. And I think going back to what you were saying before, it is an incredibly privileged position to be a musician. I think
Mhm,
about that every day, that I'm so incredibly grateful and so privileged to get to make music every day as a job.
mhm,
What an incredible gift. And the act of becoming a classical musician requires a lot of investment,
yeah.
and it's a lot of investment that not everybody is capable of doing. So that's also on all of us to make sure that we support anybody who's interested, and we make sure that there are opportunities for people to find out that this is open to them. They can
Mm,
come, that they're, like, here, have, I have an old flute, have this old flute, learn,
yeah.
but there's also so many ways to do it. And it doesn't have to be within like the very narrow classical traditional sort of way of doing it that many of us grew up with. And I think we're
Mhm.
all trying to dismantle that. Like, one of my favorite things to do is I love making PVC flutes, like flutes out of PVC
So
pipes.
fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's really easy, and you get to do it with people, and then they have an instrument that they can go home with and experiment and get really like pumped and
That's
excited
so
about.
good.
And if that like gets them like engaged in music making, then that's super exciting. Or if it gets them engaged in physics or in engineering or in building, like it can combine all these different things. And I want all of us to really encourage as many people, whether they are young people, old people, everything in between. There's never a wrong time to start getting excited about
Yeah.
music and to start studying it. It's one of the most beautiful things in that way, is that it is
Yeah.
open to anybody at any age. And like, that's that's such an amazing thing.
That's so great. I love the idea of PVC flutes.
Oh, it's so, you
oh
would
my
make the
gosh,
best ones.
that's so cool. In
Yeah.
in high school robotics, we used to use pneumatic cylinders a lot, and
Whoa.
I so like so that you've got the cylinder with this like plunger in it, and there's like a hole for air to go in, so you can blow and suck to make the thing go up and down. And I discovered pretty quickly in high school robotics that you can blow in the one end and use it as a slide flute. And so I was like
Ah!
out here playing the pneumatic cylinder, and I should have gotten PVC flutes. We could have had a whole robotics ensemble. Would have been amazing.
I mean, it's incredible. And I mean, I love that because it means that we're constantly innovating. And when you look in this
Hmm.
book and you read about these composers, that's what so many of them were doing. They were either
Yeah.
responding to technological innovations that were just being made by people, like that, who are like,
Yeah.
well, this is cool. Like, let's try this.
Yeah.
Or, someone like Toru Takamitsu, there's this beautiful story about how he, as a young man, like he didn't have access to a piano in
Yeah.
post World War II Japan. And so he made himself a paper piano. And there's this beautiful quote that I will not remember word for word, but that he said that when he finally got a real piano, it was like his dream, but it wasn't capable of all of the notes that his paper piano was capable of.
Yeah.
And I love that like we are restricted by our instruments, and we want to blow away those restrictions, because that's an incredible, like, let's get more ideas and more
Yeah.
ways to look at things, because it's only going to make all of us better, and only going to make all of us, just
Yeah.
have more to share in.
Yeah. I Also, I wonder, because I love this idea. Like they're people and they were
Yeah.
just innovating because they thought it was cool. Like things are
Or just making it
fun.
work. They're
Just
like
make it work. Just
hustling.
like let's
I
do
gotta pay the
it.
bills.
Yeah, because this is fun. I feel as a composer, and maybe you share this frustration, that we have, I don't know exactly when it happened, and I don't know exactly when it'll end. We've sort of entered an era of um a wide spectrum of our field that doesn't want to innovate any further. And I think that this is, I mean, I see it all the time with a lot of performers, kind of like will make fun of like extended techniques or notation that's weird or improvised or text scores or electronics or things like that. And maybe not necessarily make fun of, but that's kind of at its worst. But also, oh, I don't really play that kind of music, or oh, I'm not really interested in doing new music, but like thanks for asking me. Um, and I don't know that this is universal. This might just be the people, it might just be something that I've observed a little bit, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that sort of reluctance to innovate that seems to have been a little bit pervasive. Or maybe that's always been a thing and I'm just in music school right now.
Well, I think, that's in any field. It's
Hmm.
not just music, that there are people who yeah, aren't innovating at the same capacity as
Hmm.
others.
Hmm.
But I think there's also something very healthy to say, you know what, that's not my thing.
Hmm.
And I really respect it, but I'm not the right person for it. I know
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
often not how people phrase it. But that's, I always want to make sure, because that's an important, if they're like, look, that I'm
Definitely.
not good at that, and I'm not going to be the right person for you.
Yeah.
But I think it's dangerous not to be open to different ways of doing things, and finding, new ways to make sound and new ways to communicate. I mean,
Hmm.
everything that we do today was because somebody experimented and innovated in the past. Like,
Yeah.
that's what's so wild and crazy. And I love looking back in history and
Yeah.
seeing those moments where people were like, oh, this thing is so awful and so new, and we're like, what? That's like, no, no, no. So it's
Yeah.
it's really funny, but it's all, it always takes people like pushing in different areas to be able to get us to
Sure.
evolve. It really
Hmm.
is evolution. And I play a lot of early flute, so a lot of like
I love
historical
early
performance.
flutes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so fun for people to actually see like the evolution of the instrument that went
Mm.
from very, very simple. It was a wooden stick with holes and one
Hmm.
key, which is very, very similar to many different flutes that you find around the world in sort of its basic concept,
Hmm.
which is why I think people love the sound of it. They respond to it in that same way, because I think it hits those like deep, deep flute heart, that every
Yeah.
person has, no matter from where they're
Yeah.
from in the world, because it's found in every culture around the world.
Yeah.
But in Western classical music, because of the way music developed and because of the technical innovations that were happening in Europe at the same time, um, the flute evolved to what we
Hmm.
know of as today, a silver metal instrument with
Hmm.
many keys that plays very equally and plays very well
Right.
in equal temperament. Um, but it evolved to fit a specific kind of music.
Hmm.
And the music developed, they kind of did it in tandem. So
Yeah.
the two are like this, and that's a beautiful thing. And it's really cool to then have this instrument that was developed for one thing
Yeah.
and have someone tease things out of it that, the people who are innovating for the first thing we're trying to avoid. So that's why I love
Right.
talking about extended techniques and like multiphonics and being like, well, this is a sort of thing that when you're first starting the instrument,
Right.
you're really trying not to achieve. But
Hmm.
now we're actually really trying to split our air so we can get two notes at once.
Right.
Wild. And like push the boundaries of what is possible on these instruments, because we're all trying to like find new things that are going to inspire and excite us and keep us, um, you know, opening more of those petals of the
Yeah.
flower.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
I-
I'm look, I'm in the process of shopping for a new flute right now, and all my trials, I'm like, let's do all the multiphonics. Which ones will speak on this instrument? It's so
Oh
fun.
gosh, yes. And it's so different from
They're
each.
so, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm having a ball, but it's
That's great.
yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, you're going to find the instrument that works for you, and then you're going to innovate on your own instrument. You
Hmm.
might be able to find things that other people can't do. And that's what I
Yeah.
love about new music. And
Yeah.
like something that's really
Yeah.
important, I think, for people who are working with composers and
Hmm.
working on new pieces is like never write something off as impossible.
Yeah.
And on both
Yeah.
sides, if you're a composer, ask,
Yeah.
work with a performer and be like, I really would love to do this, but I don't know, what do
Yeah.
you think? Can we find something? And like, yes, chances are
Yeah.
you probably can.
Yeah.
And also, if you're looking at a score as a performer and you're like, that doesn't work, don't write it off. Talk to the composer, ask them if they worked with someone else, when they were putting
Hmm.
it together. Do they have any recommendations? These things are hard. Anything that's different or new is going to be
Yeah.
hard and scary. And I think that's the thing that can make people, not want to go there because you've spent so
Right.
many years perfecting
Yep.
your craft,
Yeah.
learning how to play, your standard repertoire perfectly, because that
Hmm.
is what our conservatory educations
Yeah.
value. And then to suddenly thrust yourself into something where it's very humbling, where
Yeah.
you're not excellent
Yeah.
necessarily, or it's not always going to speak the way you want. It's a
Hmm.
challenge. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes when people are resistant, it's
Hmm.
because they're scared. And that's
Yeah, for
totally
sure.
human and normal. And
Yeah.
like we just want to encourage them to, throw that
Hmm.
aside and
Yeah.
dive
Oh my
in.
gosh. Yeah. I have a friend that's writing me a piccolo solo right now. And I'm so excited. And she was like, "So I've heard that if you put your pinky on the end of the piccolo, you can actually get a D flat." And I was like, "I've never heard of that. Let me try it." And I tried it and it totally worked. And I was like, "This is amazing. This changes everything." And then she was like, "So what if you like lift it down? Could you get a low C?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe." And then it was like a lot of experimentation. And then I was like, "Okay, so you have to do it this way, but yes, you can get a low C." And also I discovered a way that you can play a E below the low, like an E below in the octave that a piccolo doesn't have. And I was like, this was
Amazing.
like just last week. And I was like, I think I just discovered a new extended technique. And it's so exciting. I don't know.
It's
It was
really
just
cool. But
really,
it's
really
because
fun.
you're working together and like,
Exactly. I
she
never would have
doesn't
thought
know
that.
what's possible. So she's going to push
Yeah.
you to try. And that's so important.
It
We
was
need to
so
work
fun.
together. Like
Yeah.
performers need to work with composers. Composers needs to work with performers. We cannot do this in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because I think we all, it's to the detriment of all of us if we do it
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
vacuum.
Definitely. But I think that like that collaboration, I never would have known that you could play any lower than a D. It's
That's
like
so cool.
even and it seems like so like most extended techniques that I've done at least have been like getting new sounds, but extending a range is just mind blowing to me. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that that collaborative aspect is just so important. Really, really fun. Um, yeah, I I am also I'm curious as to your ideas behind inspiring the sort of next generation of composers, as this book is like a 12 and up, which is so important and so awesome. And yeah, what are your thoughts on like passing the torch down?
Oh goodness.
I know it's a big question. I'm all about big questions that like don't have concrete answers.
No, I mean, I think we've touched upon so many of those things already that, the important thing is that anybody should feel excited to be a composer.
Hmm.
I know that when I was in school, I was actually really nervous about composing because I
Oh wow.
wasn't a composition major. And I felt
Sure.
very uncomfortable admitting it and felt like I was an imposter when it should have been the other way. It should have been celebrated that, like, here's someone who wants to do more in music and learn more
Hmm.
and express themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's the most important thing. Like, get out there, write music. There's so many ways to do it. And now we have so many additional tools. Like,
Yeah.
I remember, I mean, I have cassette tapes of myself as a 5 or 6 year old, you know, like singing songs I wrote or what,
Hmm.
to myself.
Yeah.
And today, I mean, we have iPhone or just phones that have capability to record. We have computers that have capability to record. So many of these computers come loaded with music software, which is an
Yeah.
incredible gift to so many young people. But then also to know that you all have musical instruments around the house, whether you think you do or not, because every single object can be a musical instrument.
Yeah.
You can get some pots and pans, drive your
Hmm.
parents nuts. Um,
Yes.
but like that's so cool. There's amazing composers who make music with stones, with rocks, with water,
Hmm.
who, you can go out into nature and listen to the music of birds.
Yeah.
All of these things, it's all music, and by engaging with it, you are a composer.
Yeah.
And like, just get out there and do that and embrace it, and know that each one of you, you're a composer, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, and write the music that is in your heart and that you are excited about.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's the first thing you said there was so interesting to hear, that you were a little worried about composing as not a composition major. Because that honestly never occurred to me. So I've been a composition major the whole way through, and I felt that way about playing flute. I
When
very much imposter about. I was like, oh, but like that's not like I'm a composer. Like I just play for fun. Like it's not like a thing. And only within the last like literally probably the last 2 weeks, I was like, hmm, maybe I should consider this flute thing for realsies. But like
yes,
it's wild how we have these. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, like this sort of hyper the emphasis on like being hyper specific in what you're doing so that you can go and spend 8 hours a day in a practice room. It's I don't think it's necessarily conducive to a modern artist. And
I think
yeah,
the um the striving for excellence is never a bad thing, but striving for
definitely.
excellence um it can be bad, or can be difficult if you it means that you're blocking out other things that are
Yeah.
actually going to make you a more rounded human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
And so I do think that we're seeing a big shift in classical music education there, as we embrace more. And
Mhm.
I just can't wait to see what that does for,
Yeah.
younger composers, younger performers, younger musicians who are coming up
Yeah.
today, and like how exciting and inspiring to know that there's going to be more and more.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Well, I want to be really respectful of you and your time. But as we're kind of wrapping up here, is there anything else that you would like to share or promote or muse about?
No, I mean, I'm so excited about this book. For folks who are looking to get a copy, it comes out on June 13th, but you can pre-order it on Amazon or on the publisher, the wonderful Trope Publishing, which is based in Chicago.
Lovely.
And you can go to their website, Trope is how that's spelled, and get a copy of the book, or, as I said, on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. And while, yes, it is intended for 12 and up, I think it can work for so many
Yeah.
ages.
I think the and
And
up is very, very extensive.
yeah,
Yeah.
and up, it's so important. And I also want to encourage folks, like on my website, I have emiferguson.com/iconic composers, and you can actually add more composers to the list, because it's important to us that, we make sure everybody knows this is just the beginning. These are not the
Yeah.
only iconic composers. There
Yes.
are infinite numbers of more iconic composers. So add your favorite people to the list, share your favorite recording, share your favorite story about them, because again, all of these composers are people, and they,
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. We can't just think of them as museum pieces or untouchable
Yeah.
people. They're living, they're loving, and
Yeah. And two of them are here.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that feature of your website. I got so excited to see it. Might there be a sequel potentially, or
Oh, I mean, like, why not? There's so many
yeah,
more. We could do
there's so many
like
more.
20 books of
Yeah,
sequels.
that would be so fun. Well, I'm definitely gonna look out for them. So
Oh, it would be so exciting. And each one would be additionally heartbreaking to limit it to only 50. But
yeah.
that's why, I really want to encourage folks to add their favorite people, because I'm always excited to learn about people that I
Oh,
might not have
so
heard about.
much.
It
Yeah.
happens every day. And what a beautiful thing that we can consistently hear music that is new to us on a daily basis. That is
Yeah.
such a privilege that every one of us has. And like, ugh, so
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, it's so amazing. Well, thank you so much, Emmy, for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. If you at home enjoyed the show, there's plenty more where that came from. So be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Definitely check out Emmy's book, Iconic Composers. It is it's an amazing book for really all ages. I just had a blast reading it. I cannot emphasize enough how awesome this book is. And if you would like to continue this conversation, please join the Discord, which is linked in the description, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. That's schmassical, SCHMASSICAL. And remember, as always, stay classy and questionably classical.
I love it.